Thank you everyone for joining us for the first breakout session of today. We're calling this the Digital Laneway. Really pleased that I'm joined today by Aaron Duxfield, not in person as you can see as I stand on my lonesome up here, and I'll let you decide whether I'm actually joined by Aaron or whether it's Aaron's AI avatar. But listen, before we get into the story today, this is an interactive session. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. I encourage you all to scan this now, as it won't appear again until the end of the session. If you have questions as we go, please pop them in the Slido. Would love to readdress those towards the end of the session. Give you all a moment. Still seeing a few phones out. Too far. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. My name's Damon Etherington. I lead the Enterprise team for Contentsquare here in Australia and New Zealand. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Aaron Duxfield, who's the head of e-commerce at Michael Hill. Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Damon. Great to be here virtually. I can assure you I am a real person.
Most digital teams are not short on data. We're probably drowning in data. And shorter on insights than we are on the data itself. We have more dashboards, more reporting, more metrics, more touch points, more tools than we ever have before. We've got more AI summarizing all of that back for us every day. And don't worry, you're going to get an AI summary of today's session before you leave to take with you, so rest assured. But I think for a lot of teams, the challenge is not the access to data. The problem is turning that data into decision. It's getting to the answer quickly. It's understanding where your customers are running into friction. It's understanding what that's costing the business, and it's understanding what you should prioritize first. And really, that's what we're going to unpack today with Michael Hill. And this isn't a perfect transformation story. I don't know if that really exists. This is a practical look at how a digital team that was under commercial pressure changed the way they made decisions internally using data and understanding customers more intimately about how they engage with digital properties. So Aaron, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Michael Hill?
Thanks, Damon. As you mentioned, head of e-commerce for Michael Hill. I hope most of you know who Michael Hill is, but if you don't, from humble beginnings, founded in Whangarei, New Zealand by Sir Michael, we're now the #1 jeweler in Australasia, across now New Zealand, Canada, and Australia, with nearly 300 stores globally.
Awesome. So let's jump into a quick poll in the room. I'd like to get some answers from you guys on where things sit before we jump into the Michael Hill story. I think you've all been given a bracelet, an interactive bracelet. Hopefully you've done a few of these already, so you know how it works better than I do. But question number 1. How does you rate your business, or how does your business make decisions today? Put red if it's mostly opinion-led, put blue, data-led but slow, and put green if data-led and action-oriented. You're able to take action on those things. What am I seeing? Few greens, few blues, definitely a couple of reds, bit of a mix, always good to have it across the spectrum. Awesome. Question number 2. When performance drops, when something goes wrong, what is the hardest part? Put red if it's finding the root cause of the issue. Put blue, proving the commercial impact of the issue. And put green, getting the business to act on it. I'd say majority red from where I'm standing, understanding the root cause. Lots of green as well, getting the business to act on it. And I think that comes down to resourcing, right? Rarely are these things a technology problem. It's really how do we get the organisation organised around this problem, understand how much of an impact it is, and make change. All right, next question, last one. How embedded is digital analytics in your business? Specialist owned, probably by one team that sort of really owns it. Used by some teams inconsistently, or embedded in all teams in daily decisions for green. Seeing red, blue, very little green in the room. Cool. All right, thank you guys. I like these bracelets, these are good. All right, Aaron, perhaps we start with before Contentsquare, the before state. Rewind a couple of years, you had GA4, you had Looker Studio, Contentsquare did not yet exist in the organisation. You had e-commerce reporting, trade reporting. That didn't necessarily mean that you could act with confidence on that data and with agility. Tell us a bit about what it looked like before Contentsquare was brought in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I think back to our analytics environment before Contentsquare, to be honest, it was quite fragmented and fairly heavy to operate day to day. We were heavily reliant, as you mentioned, on Google Analytics and Looker Studio, and a lot of our reporting was dependent on manual tagging. So we learnt quite a lot actually on agencies and our engineering team to build and maintain dashboards, especially when we wanted to surface insights more than just surface level insights. So how was trade performed, but actually how customers interacted with the site and where are the friction points. So getting to an answer wasn't quick. It was certainly wasn't something every team could do themselves. Insight often sat behind a layer of technical complexity. So instead of the broader business or empowering the broader business, we had a relatively small group of people acting as a bottleneck, pulling data together, validating it, and translating it back to stakeholders.
I think it's a really common thing I hear from a lot of brands still that are working in that kind of setup, that you've got plenty of reports and dashboards, but often getting answers relies on going to a team, and even then you're finding out what happened, but it's really difficult to find out why it happened and how you should act upon it. So really, really common situation. If something looked broken back in those days, if something didn't look right, there was a metric that crashed through the floor, how did the team decide on what to do and what to act on?
Yeah, look, honestly, it was quite subjective and opinion led. We had tracking in place, obviously, and error logging, but we didn't really have a good way of quantifying impact. So a lot of decisions were driven by opinion or whoever had the loudest voice in the room, often through customer service. So we knew something was broken or that a customer had an issue, but we couldn't easily answer the critical questions like how many customers are affected, how is this impacting conversion rate, is it creating friction on a high value part of the customer journey. So we were often making prioritization calls with a clear sense of commercial impact, and that's not a great place to be when you're trying to grow a digital business.
Yeah, I think it's where digital analytics becomes commercial, right? And I think that's something that I'm often talking to brands about as they adopt Contentsquare. It's not just about understanding that, hey, this metric has changed. It's about what impact did that have on revenue, on retention, on the metrics that really matter from a customer experience standpoint. So I think some good insight there. I'm curious as to what was happening in the business at the time, Aaron, because obviously usually making a big change and changing tooling internally requires a bit of change or pressure internally to find new ways of doing things. What made bringing Contentsquare into the organisation a bit more urgent for you?
Yeah, look, timing-wise, it really started when digital started to play a larger role in the business. As the digital team was growing, the digital business was scaling. We were starting to lean a lot more into CRO and experimentation. So as e-commerce grew, naturally, there's more visibility from leadership in the broader organization around performance, and with that came, higher expectations around growth. So basic analytics and heat mapping could give us a view of what was happening, but it wasn't really the why. We needed to understand the why and then where the biggest opportunities were. And when you're trying to unlock meaningful growth, the what isn't enough. You need to understand behavior and the why. So that's really when we started to recognize that we needed a more robust experimentation platform, not just a report, but to actually actively inform decisions and drive growth.
Yeah, it's something I hear a lot from brands, especially those on GA4, and I think it really came to a fore when everyone was migrating from Universal Analytics to GA4, and there were a whole bunch of challenges that came from that when organisations were starting to realise potentially how fragile the setup was or how dependent they were on certain resources. What did that transition look like for you guys?
Yeah, it really exposed how fragile parts of our measurement ecosystem were. We saw data gaps, inconsistency with key metrics, and fairly significant attribution challenges. Even something as fundamental as conversion tracking became far more complex. So we had to rebuild goals as events. And at the same time, attribution models were shifting, shorter look back windows, more reliance on data-driven attribution. So not only we were dealing with a new complexity, we were also less certain and more confident in the numbers we were reporting. So underneath all that, was also a growing dependency on engineering. Every event needed to be considered, implemented, and maintained in the data layer. That takes time. It comes at a cost. So it really highlighted that the model we were operating under just wasn't fit for purpose anymore.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Well, I think that's a good look at the life before Contentsquare. Perhaps we now have a think about or a look at what's changed since then and how teams are adopting it across the organisation. I know it's been a really great couple of years working together. We've now got multiple teams across the business using Contentsquare. Can you tell us a bit about the teams that are using it and what matters for them?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for me, when we onboarded a new data platform or experience platform, I wanted to make sure it was something that everyone in the business could use, not just a data team or a trade team. So Contentsquare is now embedded into daily decisions across key teams, marketing, trade, UX, and product, helping us move faster from insight action and impact. So, it's our primary experience and conversion intelligence platform now. It's how we understand why customers behave the way they do, where friction exists, and which optimization will drive the biggest commercial impact.
But being able to collaborate as a cross-functional unit and have a discussion with a single source of data that is useful to everyone, I think really is where it starts to move the needle. Let's dive into some of these to give some practical examples. Maybe we start with trade. I think trade teams are always balancing, a mix of brand and campaign and promotional and revenue priorities. Tell us a bit about how the trade team use Contentsquare.
Yeah, of course. Trade are predominantly the heavy users of the tool. The video you can see behind Damon there, that's a simple use case of our zoning analysis that the team use on a daily basis. So what you see up there is the Mother's Day gift guide, and what we identified pretty early on was actually our highest value component on that page was hidden at the bottom of the page with only 5% of customers seeing it, but it had the highest rate of engagement and the highest conversion rate. So, the team can quickly act on that and go, okay, well, we need to make a change. And they quickly move that to the very top of that gift guide. And, that's driving a great outcome for us. So it's just that simple ease of use, it's at the hands of the team. They can look at it and they can embed it into their daily decision-making, understand where customers are dropping off, campaigns, gift cards, landing pages, creating friction or driving momentum, promo content updates performing, so how Contentsquare helps, journey analysis to identify, step level drop off, zoning, as you can see on the screen there, to validate CTA visibility and content engagement, and session replays are really important as well. So, understanding segments like a customer that clicked a CTA and didn't convert, why, we can drill into that and have a look at customers actually using the site and session replays to understand exactly where the friction lives.
Fantastic. I think it's often with the trade team, it's the basics, right? It's the questions they need to have answered really quickly in order to optimize on the fly as soon as campaigns have gone live or traffic is flowing in from a big initiative. So awesome to hear. I think we've got some more examples here.
Yeah, this is just a quick example of an optimization we made or an opportunity we identified on MyBag. What we found was that our secure checkout call to action was hidden below the fold and quite far down on the page, and customers were missing it, and it was creating quite a bit of friction. So we implemented a sticky CTA. We tested it through Optimizely and analyzed it through Contentsquare. And what we found was by implementing the sticky checkout, we saw an 18% decline in exit rates, which is amazing.
Awesome. Great outcome. I think there's another example here on the search bar.
Yeah, search bar. So what we found through Contentsquare was that a lot of customers were going to search as opposed to navigation. So what that immediately flagged was why. Is there friction in the navigation of customers not easily able to find what they're looking for? And we did a bit of research and ran a few tests, and what we found was the menu was quite complex and cluttered. So we simplified that, cleaned it up, added some clear navigation hierarchy. And that really helped drive engagement and conversion through the menu.
Yeah, such an important one. I think this is often a gold mine for where we find insights, right? Thinking about search, global nav, the filters that users are using. Essentially, where is there friction that users are encountering where they can't find what they need across an e-com site? So super critical. I think there's more on this. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just while we're on search, I mean, this is another example. As we were digging into search, we did understand that customers were reaching dead ends more often than we would like. The search results weren't offering the exact result they expected, and sometimes the experience became binary. They either found the product immediately or they stopped the journey altogether. So So what we decided to do, instead of optimizing search purely for, we started optimizing for continuity. So we introduced things like recently viewed for returning users, top category recommendations, and the ability to search relevant content across the website. Giving a lot of our customers come to the website to research and purchase in store. It's importantly that we've got not just product, we've got content as well to help them, just more like guided discovery experience. And, it's really important for customers. And these weren't massive redesigns, that were small tweaks to our search experience. And what we saw was a 30% increase in add to cart rate for customers using search and a 32% uplift in conversion. So sometimes showing sometimes just small changes, understanding why, and making some simple changes can have a really big impact.
Yeah, massive results, over 30%. I think one of the things I often see with Contentsquare when we bring it in for a new brand is you're not optimizing towards someone from a search results going into a PDP. You're optimizing towards the end outcome that you're looking for. What's the biggest impact on revenue or the conversion or the add to bag or whatever that key goal is. So being able to tie it to the metrics that really matter and optimize the site towards that, I think can be really critical. Let's jump into UX. I think and another really important cohort. And I think what we often see is UX as being forced to be a little bit reactive. When a customer complains or a stakeholder internally raises a problem, they're chasing what the issue is and trying to put a fix in place. But often with Contentsquare, it's about how do we help them be more proactive and have data at their fingertips in order to make decisions more confidently. How are UXers using Contentsquare internally?
Yeah, I mean, we were very similar. Our UX team were sitting on the back of feature requests and designing components and user journeys, but they weren't really in the data and on the tools. And we really did want the UX team to be more proactive and understand the friction points across the customer journey. They've got a great mind for that kind of stuff, and it shouldn't just be a trade or a data team decision. The UX team should really be across the data as well. So key questions that the UX teams are. So where are customers frustrated? What elements are ignored or misunderstood? What fixes will lift conversion? They spend a lot of time in Contentsquare looking at rage clicks, dead clicks, scroll reach, hesitation time, visual evidence to support CRO, funnel comparison, and really A/B testing insights and analysts. So, the end result is the CRO roadmap driven by data, not opinion.
Fantastic. I think we've got a few examples here.
Yeah, we do. So this is, this is a great example of a simple change having an enormous impact. So what we found and what our UX team did, they did a bit of an analysis through Contentsquare and our PDPs. And, given jewelry and jewelry as a product, we have very high value product and some transactional product that's low value, could be $100, and we could have an engagement ring that's $100,000, right? So we needed to understand those customer behaviors individually by product type and by price. And what we found is, as expected, those customers have very different browsing behavior and they're interested in a lot of different things. And for engagement ring and diamond customers, we had the description and the product details quite low down on the PDP and had a relatively low exposure rate. And what we found was that was actually incredibly valuable to those customers, but it was being pushed down by the style width, which is far less relevant for those customers, but a lot more relevant for a transactional product. So what we actually did was flip that. So we moved the description above style width, and we saw just from that simple change, 48% increase in conversions on engagement ring pages.
Amazing outcome. And I think that's often the power that Contentsquare brings to the table is the ability to slice and dice cohorts and compare segments or different types of user behavior or outcomes you're looking to drive on the site, and understand that there is a difference in behavior or what they're looking for and be able to make those sort of changes. So I think that's a really great example. I think we have another one.
Yeah, we do. This is a slightly different one. So what we found through the journey analysis tool was one behavior we kept seeing in the journey analysis was customers repeatedly bouncing between product listing pages and product detail pages with a very low conversion rate. So what that told us was that customers were trying to compare products without the browsing experience was forcing too much effort. So they had to keep open individual PDPs to view alternate imagery, color, and product variations. So instead of pushing customers deeper into that journey, we brought more discovery directly into the PLP experience itself. What you're seeing in the video is the updated browsing experience where customers can swipe through imagery and explore swatches directly from the listing page. So, that comparison makes a comparison much faster, more intuitive, far less disrupted to the journey. And the impact was huge. Customers interacting with these features converted at a rate 260% higher than before. So customers interacting with the swipeable images and the swatches, obviously, really helped their discovery and they converted at a much higher rate.
That's awesome. I think it's not only the outcome that's fantastic there, but the ability that you were able to measure that really effectively and understand that users were behaving with those PLP product carousels in that way to get to that outcome, I think is really strong.
Yeah, it's one more example. So just around hesitation at checkout, obviously checkout being such a critical part of the customer journey. What we found looking at session replays and a few other analysis was that the current experience or the old experience was quite disjointed. We had delivery methods breaking up the customer details. So we had email and phone number at the top, but then we had product detail, fulfillment. Then we had the rest of the product, the customer details below that. And it just didn't make sense. We had customers going back and forth. It was creating a lot of friction. It was confusing. So we actually just flipped that and had fulfillment methods right at the top. That's the first thing you do when you enter the checkout, and then you complete the input fields and put all your details in and log in to be a member if you want. And what they did, just combine the fields into a single step, and improve checkout flow efficiently. We saw a 15% drop in cart abandonment, and 3% increase in annual revenue coming through. So again, simple change, huge impact.
Yeah, awesome change. I think the last thing you want to be doing is tripping customers up when they've already started a checkout process and have given you clear intent that they want to be making a transaction. So being able to identify what's causing that friction. We've even seen that with customers at the payment screen, right at the last step, and maybe Apple Pay isn't displayed even though it's the highest converting payment method, things like that. So I think, yeah, awesome outcome there. Let's maybe pivot to the product team. Really important. I think often the challenge for them is not not just deciding what they should build or fix, but proving once they've built it that it's actually causing the outcomes. Like it proves the work was worth the effort internally. Tell me a bit about how the product team are using Contentsquare.
Yeah, definitely. I think for the product team, it's twofold. It's understanding which issues are generally worth the effort to go after. So, we get a lot of feedback coming through our customer service team, or someone in the executive team might see an issue on the website and raise it. So what we can do now is we can validate that. We go, actually, only 1% of customers are seeing that. It's not directly impacting conversion. Let's get into the backlog and prioritize it, but it's not gonna jump to the top of the queue. So that's been hugely valuable for the team. The other areas you mentioned is our new features improving the experience or creating friction. That's really important. And also, what is the revenue impact of not fixing something? So being able to quantify that is really important as well. So, some of the key features the team uses, impact quantification on known issues, session replays, understanding the why, validation of feature adoption and unintended consequences, and then journey comparison pre and post feature deployment is really important as well. So the end outcome is better prioritization, clearer ROI discussion, and less rework.
Yeah, fantastic. I think often the blind spot for product teams when we engage with them is that impact quantification, like being able to tie it to that end outcome. We did this for a reason. It was briefed into us because there was a customer issue in the journey. Did this product change or this feature or this capability now drive a meaningful impact to that end result? Can you talk to some examples for us?
Yeah, so this example was really around the redesign of the whole site, but we isolated the PDP in particular as we're going through rebranding and redesigning. We took the opportunity to really identify the PDP and where some of the friction areas were on the PDP and redesign the PDP around real customer behavior. So we spent a lot of time on the structure of the PDP, but in particular, the visibility and the image rotator and how clear and the imagery is, given jewelry being a very considered purchase, emotional, high value, we needed to make sure the imagery was front and center. And what we're finding that customers just weren't interacting with the thumbnails as high as we would like. So we decided to move it to a grid system, redesign, add new guidelines around photography, and just make those images really front and center. And we did some testing around it. And what we found, with the improved grid layout, the improved product visibility, it resulted in far easier exploration, and customers could really see the product and feel more confident buying the product online. That's a really, really big friction point for us is, when you're buying something over $1,000 and something like jewelry, you usually want to go in store and have a look at it, right? So how can we give customers more confident that what they're buying online is what they're going to get? And we saw some great results from that as well. So we saw a 4% increase in add to cart rate, but more importantly, a 64% increase in average transaction value. So what that tells me is that customers are more confident spending more money because they can see the product more clearly and they're more confident in what they're buying.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think being able to infer something like confidence is often really hard with digital analytics. So that your ability to tie it all together to give you that kind of sentiment, I think, is awesome. Let's maybe have a think about how we tie that all together. You've given some really good examples there across multiple teams. I'd love to understand, if we could think about the before and after, how would you wrap it up? What's your summarized version of, thinking about before Contentsquare to after Contentsquare, the impact it's had in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just how we've embedded it across the business, how, the teams are now enabled and empowered to make data-driven decisions. Our roadmaps, defined by data now, not opinions, and that's really important. We've got a clear view on what changes are going to actually drive a commercial outcome, and that's really important for the team and the confidence the team have, but also transitioning and all translating up to the executive level as well, and give the team the executive level confidence in what the team's building and what we're going after. Before Contentsquare, tracking was manual. We had fragmented reporting. We had no alignment across teams, and it was slow to realize impact from data. Now, data is a key decision maker for us. We've got cross-team collaboration and we've got far smarter prioritization. So it's crucial for us now. It's embedded in the teams and it's embedded in how we work.
I often hear as well, it changes the way you work with your agencies as well, from the agency being, someone who helps with the tagging or making sure the data is accurate, to someone who's helping to, act faster and make decisions faster and move with more confidence. Is that the case for you?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Most of our agency time was, exactly, completing data layer specs, building dashboards. That's just not something we require anymore. Obviously, the data layer is still important and we still make sure the data layer is maintained, but it's not critical. If you miss something in the tagging or the tracking, you've got other means to find that data. You don't have to go back into engineering and get that redeveloped. So that's been really important and definitely changed the way we work with our agencies.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'll put this Slido back on if there's people who missed it earlier who may have questions, but keep those questions coming. I've got a couple while everyone gets their questions into the chat. I'm keen to understand what's next for Michael Hill and sort of how you're thinking moving forward. Obviously, we're entering a bit of a strange time for everyone as AI makes its impact, and all sorts of changes hitting us both economically and financially and whatnot. How are you thinking about connecting Contentsquare into the broader business ecosystem? I know you've mentioned Optimizely there. I know you're using Braze as well. There's various tools. How are you thinking about it from an omni-channel perspective, and how Contentsquare can support some good customer outcomes?
Yeah, it's critical. Obviously, Michael Hill, we're a huge omnichannel business. Most of our sales are still store driven, even though digital's growing at a rapid rate. We're still a very store driven business, and a lot of our transactions that come through the website are fulfilled in store. So that omnichannel journey is critical for us. We've started connecting Contentsquare into our data layer. Inside our data lake, so we can start to understand how customers are interacting with certain components or certain products on the website, and then does that influence conversion in store? So starting to connect those dots and stitch that data together is really important for us. We get a lot of customers adding products to their bag without converting, but what we found was within 7 days, a large portion of those customers actually convert in stores. So they're just using the shopping bag as a wish list, essentially. So that data is really important because it helps us tailor our strategies around what we go after, and what our cart abandonment rate really means. It might not actually be as high as we think, because actually a lot of those customers that are adding to their bag, while we think they're just abandoning and not purchasing, they're still purchasing with Michael Hill. They're just choosing to purchase in store. So being able to tailor our optimization strategies around that is really important. And so connecting the data together and making sure that Contentsquare is in the middle of that is really important.
I think it's a critical one, right? Like if you were operating in a siloed structure, you would see that as abandonment. Like all that digital effort led to someone putting it in the bag and never converting, and we should change initiatives and change our digital strategy, where actually it's doing exactly what you want. It's getting people into store, completing a purchase, and you being able to connect those dots because Contentsquare is being put into your data warehouse into Snowflake, I think makes all the difference, which is awesome. And then secondly, I think it unlocks a whole ton of other use cases, right? Like if you know that someone's gone and bought their engagement ring in store, we know they're probably looking for wedding bands in 6 to 12 months time. That can influence your braise strategy, and then when they hit the site the next time, we know what their intent is likely to be, and we can personalize effectively. Are you starting to think about those kind of campaigns and implement those as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Those retention strategies are key, and that's a perfect use case, Damon. That's something I think about a lot, and we're working on at the moment. Is that exact example of someone's bought an engagement in a store, and they come back to the website. How do we know that, and how do we showcase them relevant wedding bands or a relevant product that might be related to their in-store purchase, not just their online purchase?
Yeah, and I think it's a great example of personalization. I think personalization, if it's too granular, can feel a bit creepy, but if a brand is engaging with you in a big moment of their life like that, and you remember it, and you're giving them personalized recommendations, I think it actually lands really well, because they've kind of trusted you with that knowledge, and you're acting in the right way. So that's awesome. I think the next question is the mandatory one about AI. Everyone's talking about AI. I sometimes cringe when I need to talk about AI, but I'm keen to hear how you're going with AI internally, both with Contentsquare's AI. Hopefully everyone saw a little bit of where Contentsquare's heading from that perspective, and Sense Analyst, and how you're using that internally, but also more broadly across the organisation. What can you share?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to Sense quickly. We're really starting to dig into that now, and the teams are using it a lot. It's incredible just to get insights really quickly. Well, Contentsquare is quite a user-friendly platform. Just to be able to quickly go, I'm having this issue, or I'm a CRO analyst, and I want to understand what's happening on this page or where this friction exists. About to have the Sense Analyst go away and do that analysis for you, and then from there you can take it away and validate it and look a bit deeper. But just at a high level, understanding where the friction exists and where the right areas are to go after. Streamlining that and making it a lot faster. I mean, the teams can start working on solutions a lot quicker. So, that's been really valuable for us. AI in general at Michael Hill, we're really starting to embed that internally. We haven't really done a lot of customer facing AI yet, but internally we are embedding that quite a lot across the business. We've built internal MH Assist apps for our stores to help answer questions quicker if customers are in front of them, and then really starting to embed that in our decision making. And that's been really powerful, just speeding up what's happening. How do we make faster decisions? How can we streamline processes? Just empower the team, or take some of that mundane work that would take a lot of time, so the team can focus on more impactful work.
Yeah, fantastic. I think everyone's kind of adopting AI from a productivity standpoint, right? How can we do more with less and move more quickly? And Sense really leans into that. The ability to have an analyst assistant, which is trained on your data, knows how to use Contentsquare to do analysis, can answer any question that you have at your fingertips, and give you not only the answers, but also all the working, so that you can really sort of thoroughly review the data that sits behind any recommendations that it's making for you. Certainly we're seeing that's been a huge productivity gain internally. We've got a few questions from the audience, and I know you've got them as well there, Aaron, but I might pick one to start with. So this is from Anonymous. Thank you, Anonymous. How does each team prioritize uplifts based on their Contentsquare findings? Does one team lead what digital should focus on next?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Essentially, we have a shared backlog and prioritization meetings. We bring in cross-department teams to work through the backlog and what we think the right work we should be working on, and all of that's data led. So anything that enters the backlog needs to have a reason, needs to have a problem that we're trying to solve, and a commercial impact by implementing that. And then we essentially run in an agile environment. So we have fortnightly sprints, and then we have prioritization and elaboration meetings where we, as a team, decide on what the right prioritization of work that we should be working on, that supports the larger project work that we're doing. So there's obviously large project work that we do that is fed down from business, or we've got certain uplifts or tech improvements that we need to make. But around that, we have resource and capacity to do enhancements and enablement and CRO. And that's all prioritized by the team based on the commercial outcome or the potential commercial impact.
Fantastic. Switching gears slightly, technical question, or not necessarily, but more logistics and operations. How long did the technical implementation take, and how long did the rollout to your end users take?
Oh, that's a great question to think back to the technical implementation.
Going back a few years.
Look, it was yeah, it was a while ago. Look, it was pretty lightweight in all fairness. Contentsquare is not a difficult piece of tech to enable. Really, the time came from empowering the teams and getting it embedded in the team. So, it pretty much is a pretty lightweight JavaScript tag to enable the Contentsquare platform. We did a bit of work behind the scenes to, stitch our customer ID, and we did a bit of changes to the tag just to make sure we had our single view of customer, and that's something internally that we built into the tag. So, that pushed out the timelines a little bit, but in general, it's a pretty lightweight piece of tech to implement. The onboarding, took a bit of time, but once the team found their feet and, with the support of Contentsquare, they were pretty empowered to go after it. And then how we embedded it in the teams and got uptake across the business is really defining particular use cases. So, by doing this, or what do you need the tool for? And, from a marketing point of view, it's to understand, the impact of your digital marketing, where it's landing, what's working, what's not, driving more efficient digital marketing spend, increasing your ROI, reducing your customer acquisition costs, driving better retention. So once you start to give the team some reasons and the why, then they start to get involved, and they start to go, okay, this is great. Let me have a look at this. And from an ecom team, it's a little bit easier. From a trade team, they're in that day to day. It's from a UX point of view, it's just, getting them in the tool, trained up, and then the time to be able to dig into the data and empowering the teams to have time to actually investigate and look into the data is key. But really, it's defining specific use cases per department and going, well, this is some of the problems we're facing today, and this is how we can use this tool to solve it. That's really how you get buy-in.
I think it's a really good point, Aaron, because I think there's often tool fatigue in an organization, right? Another tool's brought in and you hear the groans from teams that I have to learn a new tool and figure this out. But if you make it real for them, if you break it down into use cases and you make sure that in that first 90 days, we're showing them how easy it will be to solve those things and get insight into those things, it often makes it much easier, and teams get a bit more excited about the outcome rather than the process. So one more, how are you, there's a couple with a few thumbs up here. Here's a good one. Were there any opinion-led thoughts that were challenged or disproven internally by data that you've seen, and how did this affect stakeholder decisions?
Yeah, great question. This has probably been one of the biggest improvements from having Contentsquare embedded in the business. We, often a lot of decisions were opinion-led, particularly if it comes from customer service or it comes from a customer complaining, because, if anything that's customer facing, we would deem as a priority and make sure we fix it as soon as possible. But what we're finding, that isn't always the right decision. Just because it's come through customer service, we need to quantify the impact of that. How many customers are experiencing that issue? Where on the customer journey is it? Is it in checkout? Is it on a less important page? Is it only impacting 1% of customers versus 10% of customers? Being able to quickly drill into that and then quantify that impact and then validate that through session replays is really important, because then we can go back to those stakeholders and go, actually, thanks for flagging. It's really important. We've got it in the backlog. We're going to have a look at it. But from what we can see, it's only impacting 1% of customers, and it's not having a direct impact on conversion. So we're going to focus on these 10 things first, because they've got a much higher commercial outcome, but we'll get into the backlog and get it prioritized against other work, and we'll fix it, but we just won't fix it right now. And that's important. We're not saying no, or we're not going to drop everything to do it. We will do it. It's just do it at the right time and make sure we're prioritizing that work against other work, and make sure the teams, they feel empowered to go after the right things.
Fantastic. I'm being given the motion to wrap things up. I think we've got time for maybe one more. And for those we don't get to, come out to the Contentsquare booth during the break. Happy to have a chat, and I can shed a bit more light on some of these Michael Hill use cases if you're still keen. At what point did you realise you needed to upgrade your analytics game, and how did you convince senior decision makers or senior stakeholders internally to invest and get on board with Contentsquare?
Yeah, another great question. Look, two things. One was the frustration the team was having uncovering insights and drilling into data. We found, what I found, that the team were less engaged in optimization and less engaged with finding customer problems. They'll really focus on obviously landing page performance and surface level insights, but anything more complex just became far too difficult, or we had to, get some work with the engineering team to build out some custom events, or we had to work with our agency to build out dashboards, and it was just slow, it was cumbersome, and it wasn't efficient. That was one of the reasons. The other one was the pressure the team had and the pressure the digital team had on to drive growth. We're really fast tracking our CRO and experimentation. We had more visibility across the business. We had to share that upstream, and we just weren't confident in the data. So from there, it's pretty quick to go, okay, well, this is what the team's working on today. This is how much time it's taken them to pull surface level insights. We're potentially missing significant opportunities that are driving or impacting conversion rate. We need a better solution. And then from there, you can start to work that up to the business and build out a business case around it. There's time saving, cost saving, but also the team working on the right things and the commercial outcome that's going to deliver for the business.
Fantastic. Well, before we wrap up, just some very quick logistics for everyone in the room. We have a couple of great sessions coming up next. We've got the Eljana, Westpac and Independence Australia session coming up in this room after the break. And we have the Woolworths and Insider session in the main stage after the break. But next up, bubbles and dessert for everyone to recharge and get some sugar into you to continue the day. But I'd like to thank Aaron. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for coming.